Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hope you had a little bit of a break over lunch. I went and grabbed another cuppa. Welcome back. This is, I don't even know what number session it is. Lost the plot already. But we're joined by Anya. Someone says 3. I don't think it's 3. Joined by Anya, who's going to be talking to us about talking to our kids about the climate crisis, which I think is something that we all struggle with a little bit. Look, there's one of mine. That's Samuel. So in a minute I'll just up here and I'll ask Anya to introduce herself. But if you haven't been on the earlier sessions, there's a chat box here on the right hand side. You can chat in there to each other, sort of leave comments and things. If you've got questions, there's specific questions that you'd really like Anya to answer. There's an ask a question thing in the bottom menu bar there. If you click on that, you can ask a question, and it saves it all sort of getting lost in the chat. And what we'll do is Anya will do her talk, and then we'll come to some questions at the end. So you all good, Anya?
All Brilliant. Good, thank you.
Excellent. So yeah, if you want to kick off by introducing yourself, and then over to you.
Thanks, Jen, so much. It's such a pleasure to have been included in this fantastic week-long festival. My name's Anya. I'm a mum of a soon-to-be 3-year-old and soon-to-be 6-year-old. I live in Scotland, in a lovely rural part of eastern Scotland, and I have roughly 7 to 8 years professional experience working in sustainability. So I've done bits of research, bits of business development, and some writing, mostly focused on food and waste. But a couple of years ago, took a step back from that and realized that, belatedly, with my 2 new children, much younger than that, I didn't really know how to get them on board with everything I felt strongly about, everything that I was interested in professionally and personally. Not an educator myself, have no background in development psychology or anything to do with child development. And I thought, this is the career challenge of my life. So I started sort of gathering ideas that I found on the internet. The young to the board work over the last couple of years. Book got that online for people, and hopefully after this talk and on an ongoing basis, I want people to feed back to me what they're doing, what they think about what I've suggested, and just to keep the conversation going. I want to update the book every year. The first book, which I've written, focuses on waste, so what we buy and what we chuck out, basically, keep it simple. The next book will be much more about food and sustainable food systems. But yeah, so challenge of my career, how do I get my kids on board? So my youngest is still only 2. I'm focusing mostly on my 5-year-old, and I've been doing various things for a couple of years, and realized that, yes, role modeling good behaviors around living sustainably are obviously very key. So not just walking the walk, but explaining to her sometimes, not all the time, you don't want to harp on about it, explaining to her what I'm doing and why it's important. But then I thought, well, let's try and engage on her level, and sort of be a little bit more proactive about getting her on board on her terms. And I thought, well, what does she care about? What's in her small world apart from me and dad, a little brother? And it's toys, it's snacks, it's birthday parties and presents, and it's clothes. She likes clothes and she likes dressing up. So I thought, well, those are the areas I should focus on, and those are the areas I'm going to talk about today, and the things I've tried to do, trial and error basis. Some things flopped, some things definitely worked, but it's only recently that I've seen the benefits of those activities emerging. So be patient, everyone, it takes time. And I'll touch a little bit on food, because obviously that's really important, and I really want to talk to you about sustainable food systems, but that's just at the very early stages of my thinking. So I'm going to put the presentation up in a second, but just wanted to make the really important point that I've got a page on my website called Teaching Resourcefulness, which I've been updating every day since the schools closed, and each day I try to put on a new activity that looks at the things I've just been talking about. And whilst sort of Pinterest style, Instagram style, I'm on both those platforms, it looks rather fabulous. It looks like it's all going really well, and my 5-year-old's like totally getting it and all that stuff. it doesn't always go well. And obviously I put up the best pictures and the best versions of the kind of activities we've been doing, because you kind of want to sell the activity, and it can be that good sometimes. But bad days, good days. My daughter's not always interested. I'm not always in the mood for these things. So pick your days, pick your moments, pick your battles, like with everything else that you're trying to teach your children around behaviors. And if she's not interested, or if your child's not interested in certain aspects of like growing things, for example, I think it's a really important way to get a child interested in nature. There hasn't been a huge amount of traction there with my 5-year-old. She's much more indoorsy than that. So, you know, take a step back and then revisit it later. You know, take your time, trial and error. Some things work, some things don't. But my main point is that I think it's so important, and as important as how teaching your child how to treat their bodies, treating your child how to treat others, teaching your child how to treat the planet. Like, to me, those are the 3 pillars of the life skills, like the 3 most important life skills that a child needs. And then there are plenty of others, like how to manage money, but those kind of come later, I think. So keep at it. It is important, you know, just like eating well. They don't have to be interested in food and baking. My child's not, my 5-year-old's not. But, you know, eating well is important. And then I have a ratio, like an 80-20 ratio of picking my moments. So like 80% of the time, with the sustainability stuff, it's a wee bit lower. It's like 50-50. But with nutrition, it's 80-20. 80% of the time, get it right. 20% of the time, let it slide. And don't make a fuss. It doesn't matter. Let's go wild and have cake 3 times a day. You know, and those party bags full of sweets, that's fine. You know, pick your battles and don't make a fuss about the bad stuff, and focus on the positives around the good stuff. Okay, I'm rambling. So I will get the presentation up. Give me a minute to switch. There we go. Okay. And so I'm sure Jen will jump in if this isn't working. Right, here we go. Now, what's that? Now,
I can't see your screen at the moment.
So what can you see, Jen? We
can still see you. So you click on
fiddling about.
That's all right. Do share screen, and then
on
application window. So
application window, got it.
And then you should find your your PowerPoint. Brilliant. Yeah, we can see that. Perfect.
Yay. Thanks so much, guys. That's brilliant. So you can just see that. Can you see me waving around? No.
Yeah, we can.
That's a distraction.
Isn't great. So you might want to turn your video off, and that might improve the connection a little bit. So if you go wave on your screen again and you toggle video and click on the camera, that'll turn you off and might make the connection a little bit better.
Sorry, Dan, could you explain that, Jen? How do I turn the camera off?
Here we go. I might be able to do it for you. Hold on. There we go. So you're just your slides now.
That's brilliant. Okay. So I think with the reason I focused on waste for the first book is I felt it was just really straightforward. As I mentioned about the things that are important in a young child's life, they're kind of the toys and the clothes and the gifts. So there are 2 sort of simple aspects to trying to talk to a child about why what we buy is important. It's firstly about the footprint of what we buy, so the energy that's gone into making it and the energy that's gone into transporting it. And then it's about what happens to the item, the toy, the piece of clothing after we no longer want it, or we outgrow it, or it's no longer of interest to us. So my daughter's 5. So the message for her at this stage, she's not full of questions kind of child. There may well be 5-year-olds out there asking a lot more questions. My neighbour's now 6-year-old is like that. So I've only had to speak very simply about why we want to buy less in terms of the energy used to produce the item. So I keep it really simple, as you'll see. I talk about how lots of energy, usually fossil fuels, things that make the air smelly, is required to manufacture the things we buy. A lot of the stuff comes from very far away, and we've done a little audit of some of the things in our house, and the toys and the clothes in particular, and the countries that they've come from. When we look on the map and we see just how far and just how long it must take for them to reach us. And then in terms of why it's bad, what the problem with all the stuff going into the air is, I simply talk about the smell. So often when we walk along the road, we live in a very rural part of Scotland, it's wonderful, and there isn't much traffic. But when we even go into the small town, our nearest town, and we're walking by the road, you notice the smell from the cars. So we talk a lot about the smell and how that's dirty and how it's not nice to breathe. And I haven't actually had to go into very much detail about why that smelly air is a problem for the climate, and to speak longer term about how it, traps the warmth and it is making our weather unpredictable. So I realize that that's a bigger challenge ahead, and would really welcome anyone with more inquisitive 5-year-olds or with older children, would welcome their input on how they've explained the impacts of the more erratic weather that we're seeing on people and planet. And then the wasting stuff aspect, that's really simple. That's obviously all about where does our waste go? We actually live not very far from a landfill, and when we drive past it, it honks to high heaven. There's been a lot of fuss around it, understandably, from local residents. So we talk about people living near the landfills where all our stuff's going. Similar problem for people living near incinerators where waste gets burned. And then, of course, the waste that escapes into the environment. And again, parents know their children best in terms of what information they'll be able to deal with and how much you want to hammer the point home. If you go online, everyone will know just how much you can see in terms of the wildlife on land and in water that get injured. So that's your call as a parent. I haven't had to go into much detail beyond, the fish, it gets stuck in the fish's throats and it's very sore, and it's been pretty easy so far in terms of being challenged on why this is so important. So obviously, really basic place to start, plenty of resources online. This isn't my strong point, but I draw on the RSPB and the Woodland Trust and the Wild Network and the Wildlife Trust. I know lots of places, as you will do, where you can go for really good suggestions on how to nourish a relationship between your child and the outdoors. So we built a little bee house, a solitary bee house, a few days ago. We're hoping for bees to move in. Apparently they move in really quickly, so it's kind of a really rewarding activity. You can see the results quite quickly. And the little sign on the left is to go up on a tree in our village. We're going to put up trees, signs all over the place, and then do a big treasure hunt for all the children in the village to see how many they can find. I think Sir David Attenborough, as have many others, has said that if we value what is around us and in all the beauty of nature, we're more likely to want to protect it. And I think the least we can do with trees in particular, they're a passion of mine, I'm still learning all about them, is learn their names. So I thought we'll just go around the village and we'll label all the trees. And in terms of thinking at a very basic level about where our waste goes, so we drive past a landfill, not regularly, but I make a note of winding down the windows when we do, and talking about where waste goes and out into the sea. But we've also buried things a few times. We take different materials from around the house, bits of fabric or a string, a piece of ribbon, a pipe cleaner, and we bury them. We talk about what they're made from, and then we dig them up and we see what's still there and what's gone. We did it with stationery. We did a chalk and a wooden pencil, plastic pen, and a plastic wax crayon. And of course, 2 of those 4 things were still there 6 weeks later. I've always loved burying things. I think that appeals to kids quite a lot. And then the ice lollies on the left, they weren't brilliant, but we thought, what would be a lovely treat for a fish or a lolly? Yummy. My daughter's been talking about giving lollies to birds. And then we thought, well, there's quite a lot of nasty stuff in the sea. What are the kind of single-use plastic items around our house that we could really get rid of and replace with better alternatives that the fish really wouldn't want to be getting stuck in their throat? So we made these funny lollies. But if you go online, you can see some amazing Chinese artists who've created these pollution ice lollies made from real polluted water from the rivers in China. It's quite stark. So, oh, wrong way. No, sorry, right way. So, solution. So we've explained why buying less is important because it cuts out the carbon footprint from making the product, and it reduces how much stuff we're throwing away. So how do we buy less? What does that look like in a child's world? So we've got in a habit for quite a while now of sharing toys a lot, and doing and actually some dressing up clothes and nighties and a few clothing items, sharing more with peers at school. So at the first thing, I ask my daughter when she says I want something like an LOL doll, I say, well, do you know a friend who has one? And invariably she does, which is why she wants one. Then we make an arrangement with the mum or the dad, and we swap it. And that seems to get rid of the urge to own something. And now she's quite in the habit of doing that. That works really well. So share more. We've been getting creative at home the last few weeks in particular, but prior to that, this happened very haphazardly because weekends, you know, there are only 2 days to fit everything else in. So we didn't do an awful lot of that before, but we always talk about, well, can we make things? Can we make alternatives to shop bought stuff? And I'll go through a few examples of how I've done that. And gift of time activities. So we have a New Year's tree, which we put up at Christmas. And instead of thinking about all the things we want for our Christmas presents and all the things that our friends might want for us to give them, we talk about doing activities over the year ahead. And we kind of sit down and get excited about all the fun things we can do, like fossil hunting or, you know, beach combing or, you know, anything. And it doesn't have to cost money. It can just be a big treasure hunt somewhere, or, you know, it's really fun. The process of doing that is really exciting in the build up to Christmas. And then there's no anticlimax after Christmas when all the presents have been opened. So there are presents, but, you know, that's not just the focus of it all. Buy better quality, you know, the usual thing, buy things that last so then they can be passed on, and taking care of what you've got, what you have enables you to do that, and that's very satisfying. And then of course buying secondhand where possible via eBay and Gumtree and places. And the benefits, I think, to me as a parent, and I hope my 5-year-old's feeling that too already, is that these are very sort of practical solutions you can feel positive about. So when you start thinking about how the world's falling apart a little bit, whether it's deforestation, whether it's climate change, whether it's pollution, it's just too much. And I think if we can get our kids into these habits now of these little practical changes where you sort of feel a bit more in control of your impact, and you just feel a lot more empowered to kind of, yeah, I guess to do something about it. And obviously, you know, what we buy and what we chuck out is the end of the things we could be doing. But I think obviously in terms of children, that's the best place to start, because that's what they're interested in, and because it's so positive, because you can do something about it today. We can decide not to buy anything new for a while or whatever it might be. That's really positive. And then you can move on to the bigger stuff as they get older, about how you invest your money in pensions and banking, and how we travel around, and how we fuel our homes. These are much bigger changes and much more expensive changes, and they're bigger lifestyle changes. So I think start small on their terms, and then as time wears on, as they get older, as I mentioned before, use your judgment. Obviously, you know your child best. Then you start explaining why it's all important, what impact, what negative impact we are having in the choices we make every day. And the reason I talk about the importance of explaining why we need to do these things is because I think once they go into adulthood, you know, they'll sustain these changes because they'll understand the importance of them. They're not just like things we used to do growing up and now I'm out of the habit of it. They're like, no, I want to stay in the habit of it because I understand why it's important. So that's why I talk about the need to explain why we're doing all these things. And obviously parents need time, you know, things to fill the time with at weekends. I mean, most weekends are pretty squished with things, but, you know, sometimes you're just a bit short of ideas, and these activities are sort of, you know, time fillers as well as positive educational tools. And obviously through toy sharing and coming up with gift of time ideas, it's all about spending more time and building better relationships with the people you care about in your life. That's a really positive thing as well. And you care less about the stuff they give you, and you care more about the fun you can have with them. And then, yes, in many cases, you will save money, depending on what the choices are you're making. So quickly make your own. These are some examples from what we've been doing. We made our own vet's kit with fake blood and tweezers, and it's just a reminder you don't need to buy this largely plastic, mostly plastic kits. We had a beautiful doctor's kit for my best friend a few years ago. It's a total hit, but it's fallen apart. These things crack and break, and the syringe is long since gone, and it's disappointing and it's wasteful. And in this way you can play this game, and then at the end of the game you pack everything away where it's meant to go. The tweezers in the bathroom, the food coloring in the cupboard, and then there's just no stuff. There's less clutter in the house, which is great. And we've done a great skit in a bag game, the one with the dinosaur, the dog, and the pencil, and the other 2 items, and that's been so much fun. It's so creative. It's like those story cubes, but you just use what you've got in the house, which has been really good fun. Obviously there are endless examples of making your own things: Play-Doh, puppets, kites, stems. You can whittle your own wooden whatnots. The world's your oyster. There are limits to what you can make and do well. But yeah, I think that's a really great place to start, because it's an activity and it's hands-on, and in some cases the 5-year-olds can even get really involved. Natural crafts is an obvious one. Apparently by the age of 12, an average kid has generated 2,000 arts and crafts item, according to a survey last July. That's a lot of stuff. I'm sure everyone listening who's a parent has a lot of accumulated arts and crafts. So that's a lot of plastic in the bin if you're using all these googly eyes and pipe cleaners and pom-poms and sequins. So we've been foraging for bits and pieces outside. The little thingy in the boat, I obviously made that. My 5-year-old is quite fiddly. That wasn't for her, but I just loved it, so I had to put it online. But the leaf skirts and necklaces and tiaras have been a total hoot, and that's gone down really well, and they've dried nicely, the bigger leaves, to make a nice rattly kind of musical instrument as well. So that was a bit of a bonus with that. Yeah, there's, again, the sky's the limit with these things. There's natural paints you can make from spices around the kitchen, or beetroot or blackberries, and make your own paint brushes. We did a few days ago with my own hair strapped to a lolly stick. It was quite fun. And the Royal Academy has a good link for doing these sort of painting with different items you can find around the garden: leaves and flowers and straw and pine needles, and it just creates a nice big mess for younger children. And then, yeah, giving the gift of time, I've mentioned. We did this video for my brother-in-law a couple of weeks ago. We all dressed up, wigs and everything, and had these little guitars, and it was just so much fun. And it's a video we rewatch a lot at home, just because it was so much fun to do. My husband's got the scrubbing brush, and that's his microphone, and it's just feel good stuff. And that's our New Year's tree with little gift of time ideas on that we've sort of planned to do with friends and things, but that will grow and I think get much bigger as time progresses. That was last year's, but that's, it's a nice visual reminder of all the things that we're going to be doing with our friends over the year ahead. Fashion, yeah, but that's been a slightly harder one to do. So the last 4 weeks we've done a 3 outfit challenge. So I really wasn't convinced my 5-year-old was going to want to do this, but she has, and we've quite enjoyed it. We've only worn 3 outfits on rotation, and we broke our, we hit our 4-week record yesterday. And to see her excitement about a couple of things that she'd missed, and then she's put a lot of stuff that she didn't miss into a box to pass on to charity, and she does these regular appraisals just suddenly off her own bat of her clothes and her toys now, because in the beginning, maybe 18 months ago, I was trying to get her to think about what she might want to pass on, and there was just no interest and nothing I wanted to do. And so it's no problem at all, you just leave it and walk away. And then at one point I invited her up to help me sort out my clothes, and that went down really well, because obviously you've got to practice what you preach in all of this and do likewise. So up she came and tried on some of my clothes, and I was like, I'm not going to wear that again. Would you wear that when you're a grown up? And we've packed a bag of things that she might want to wear when she's older that she likes of mine, which isn't all of the things, and those that she hasn't liked I've passed on. But it's a nice, and then some of the things that she likes that I don't want to give to her just yet or pack away for her just yet. And so I've made the point that I'll take care of them, because it would make me really happy if she were to be wearing those in the future. And then the visible mending movement, you're probably familiar familiar with that, if you look online, there's some brilliant, I mean, unbelievably brilliant examples of this. That's just a sweetie that I had a stab at. But if you make it sort of fun, then it's more noticeable. And then the 5-year-old says, "What's that on your jumper?" And you're like, "It's a sweetie." And, you know, it's important to involve them in all these sort of chores that you're doing to mend stuff, to fix stuff. You know, they need to know why you're doing what you're doing. And I think visible mending's an easy one anyway, because she can see that. And then this is much trickier, and I'd love to know people's thoughts on it. This is sort of talking a little bit more about who made our clothes. So it's hard to talk to a 5-year-old about child labour, but this is a little girl that my 5-year-old drew when I explained to her that some children don't get to go to school and they have to work, and they often make the sort of fiddly tops that children love, those sequin tops, because of their small fingers. And all I said, and that was all I said about the conditions. And then I said, "Do you think she'd rather be in school or working in a factory?" And of course she said she'd rather be at school. You sort of plant a seed, I hope. Might have misjudged this, we'll see, time will tell. That was only about 3 weeks ago. So and then of course we got the Teddy to try and join in with the Fashion Revolution campaign, "Who made my clothes?" And usually people hold up a sign saying that, and then you post it, and then you tag the relevant company. So yeah, the who made your clothes aspect, the social impact of what we buy, and fair trade and living wages and things, that's been a much harder one to explain. Food, I'm at the very early stages of. So we've put together like a food provenance map of the world, and stuck on food where it's been produced, just to kind of get the old juices flowing. And we've got it up on the table actually. So sometimes when my daughter asks for blueberries again, I say, "I will get the blueberries when you can tell me where they are on the map." You know, and so she'll go and have a little hunt, and it's a brilliant visual reminder for me about where things come from, and thinking a little bit about the journey. So that's the start of food provenance. And on the right, yeah, you've got this peculiar picture showing I got my daughter to place the fruit and veg in the right place. I think that's all right, although the onion needs to be a bit higher above the ground and it's up the wrong way, but never mind. And she quite enjoyed that. And with some of these activities, it's a case of having to incentivize with the morning snack. You can get the morning snack once we've completed this task, so that's fine, I think. But yeah, early stages of talking about food. We've done a little bit about provenance and how things grow. And we've talked a little bit about insect protein as a low impact protein. I haven't really sort of explained that particularly, but I wanted to sort of normalize, quote unquote, consuming insects. And those biscuits have cricket flour in, which is a whole lot more palatable than the actual crickets, which have gooey centers, which I'm not very good at, and my daughter wasn't very good at either. But the mealworms and buffalo worms I can recommend, because you can actually see what you're eating. They're worms, but they're like wafers, so it's totally, you know, you can actually manage it. And on the right, we did a bit of story writing. A lot of children like writing stories. My daughter does. So this is a wonky carrot. So we talked about sort of so-called ugly vegetables, and a little bit about food waste. And this dear wonky carrot has a walking stick to help him walk, but there's nothing wrong with him. He's just as tasty as any other carrots. But yeah, the story's not there for you to see. Yeah, and so that's it really. It's a bit garbled. It's trial and error. It's me trying to get a conversation going, trying to be open about why I think this is important, trying to involve her as much as possible in all the activities that I'm doing with her directly, trying to get her involved in making stuff instead of buying stuff. And, you know, for example, when we order secondhand things for her birthday and for her brother's birthday, I get the seller to write a note from the previous owner, so from the previous child owner, and they write a little note saying, really hope you enjoy wearing this or playing with this, you know, I've had so much fun with it, just as a little gentle reminder of the fact that this is secondhand or third hand possibly, and just to make that normal. So it's kind of normalizing all this stuff, making it habitual, and then gently explaining why it's all important. And hopefully it sinks in. But really want to hear from everybody else, because the book that I've written is so much about what everyone else is doing, as much as what I'm doing, and I just want to grow that, and to make it a sort of more relevant and up to date collaborative tool, really, year on year. So please get in touch. My email's there. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. And I hope this has been useful, and I'm really looking forward to the questions.
Anya, that has been absolutely amazing, and it wasn't garbled at all. Somebody else said the same in the comments. I am just blown away by all the different things the creative ways that you've kind of engaged your 5-year-old. And the thing that really struck me is that we've been talking in the sessions this morning about the fact that, you know, a lot of what we do is unconscious. A lot of it is just sort of knee-jerk and, you know, for convenience and things. And I think, you know, I admit myself that the way I sort of parent, certainly before we did our year buying nothing new, it's very unthoughtful almost. It's just like, well, not unthoughtful, because you're thinking about what you can do with the kids and what's best for your kids, but you're not necessarily thinking about the environment at the same time. And I think you've just demonstrated so easily how, by just taking a little bit of a step back and just being a little bit more thoughtful about, you know, you can do the same things, but just doing them in a slightly different way, which is like absolutely what sustainable-ish is all about. I had a question. Did you say you made those biscuits with cricket flour?
Yes, with cricket flour.
Where did you get that?
Yeah, I didn't grind them up myself. Eat grub. Might have done. It's that way.
And you just use
trees and everything. What did I do? I combined it with bread flour, because the last time I tried to do a cricket flour only pancake, which I thought, great, I'll cover it in berries and things. They were having none of it, the kids, because it's too strong a taste. Mixed in with something more, more mainstream.
Brilliant, fab. Well, that was my question. There's a question in the thing. Oh, somebody's asking how long the talk will be. So, yeah, and also I wanted to say absolute bonus points to you, Anya, because you were like on the minute to half an hour, which is amazing. A couple of questions which
I'm surprised.
Yeah.
But look, you see, lots of notes. Didn't say half of it. Never mind.
Oh, no, it was brilliant. Somebody's asked about ideas for engaging sort of 12 to 16-year-olds. So I guess, you know, teenagers and things. And I know, you know, yours are much younger. Mine are, my eldest is 11. So we're just sort of coming up to that. But if anybody's got any thoughts, pop that into the chat. But had you sort of thought that far ahead yet, Anya?
I haven't. I mean, my 5-year-old joined me on one of the climate strikes last year, only once, and I asked her 3 or 4 times in the lead up to it to be sure. She said yes. She explained the importance of getting involved in terms of the melting ice and the penguin colonies that have drowned. And the reason I went as far as to say that the penguins had died was because she'd heard a Radio 4 broadcast about that particular story, maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks before that climate strike, maybe even 2 months. But she'd heard the word penguin. She'd asked me what they were talking about. I explained it, and then she hadn't brought it up again. And then when I mentioned the climate strike and the warming South Pole and the penguins, she said, "Oh, like on the radio." And I thought, wow, you know. So it's, I think, 12 to 16-year-olds. What am I trying to say? I think getting involved in something practical where you feel like you're doing something is hugely helpful. With the climate strike for us that one time, it did feel really useful because we met a lot of our friends, so some of her friends from school and a lot of my grown-up friends who she knows as well, out on the walk. And we talked about how we felt positive being part of something that obviously so many people care about. And it made us want to go home and think about the small things we could do today, much of which I've talked about in the presentation, that would make us feel like we were doing something. So that wasn't actually in the speeches that were given at the when we all sort of came down to the beach, and that was when all the talks happened. That wasn't spoken about. Maybe someone did mention go away and think about what you can do today, but we went home and we had a chat about it, because otherwise you're left reeling and you're not, you know, and you come away actually feeling worse for it. Well, I would anyway, if I hadn't then gone through, well, what can we do? But 12 to 16-year-olds, I'm way out of my depth. I'm sorry.
I Matt put a comment in the chat that
good examples of teenagers doing amazing things. Sorry.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, Greta and things. I think to a certain extent, and I think with children of all ages, you need to yes, it's really important that we have these conversations with them, but I guess, you know, if we're modeling those behaviors with them, Matt's saying he does litter picks and eco clubs with the local secondary school, and so, you know, if it's just the thing you do when you go out for a family walk, that you pick any litter up that you see, or, you know, it's just a thing you do that you have meat-free Monday, and you will talk about why you're having meat-free Monday. You know, teenagers like to have a tendency to rebel, so, you know, they're not going to come to it if if it's something that is coming from you. So I think a lot of the time we almost need to let them come to it in their own time and in their own way. A lot of people have mentioned that their teenagers are using Depop, which is a second-hand platform for clothes and things like that. So, you know, I think it's all about modeling these behaviours as a family, and you know, being open with your conversations with them about it, but, you know, without kind of, ultimately it's everybody's agenda, but it's our kind of passion, and it can be really frustrating when maybe they're not sort of engaging or seeming particularly on board, but they might turn around when they're 21 and do something incredible. You just don't know. So, you know, I think it is very much kind of planting the seeds, having the conversations, modeling the really practical stuff that you can do. Jay Ching says her daughter turned vegan after going to Greta's speech last year.
And I think,
go on, Anya.
Wow, that is amazing. And you're right, it's about planting the seed. It's about planting the seed, and you don't quite know when. So it's giving them the information in a really sort of subtle but gentle way, and then as you say, let them come to their own decisions. They have to feel like this is something they want to do, like these toy and clothing appraisals of that my daughter does of her own possessions. That's entirely off her own, but I don't even have to say it anymore. And even in the beginning, when I mentioned it to her, it was never something I said she had to do. It was a suggestion, just like everything else I'm trying to do is a suggestion that she can then make a decision around. And then in terms of things like, you know, this 80-20 or this 50-50 balance, you know, if I always think, well, is she going to feel excluded sort of socially from her peers? Because that's all starting to really matter to her now. She started school last year. Then I have to review whether the choice I think that she should be making around whatever it is a good one. You know, for me, the fitting in, because it's so important to them. It's so important for all of us, obviously, but particularly for her as she's starting school, that trumps the environmental stuff at the moment.
And I think with teenagers,
so I always go very gently. And with teenagers, I imagine it's exactly the same, if not more so. And so it's really nice that I'm sort of trying to practice that now from 5 and hopefully get it right by the time they're teenagers. No idea, but to make it's got to be her decision. And if she feels like all her other friends get something that it's not fair, then, you know, I'll review it and we'll talk about it. And, you know, like going to all these all-class birthday parties, and my daughter will say, well, let's take a present. I know so-and-so would like that. And I'll say, well, I'll talk to their parent and maybe see if they like reading books, and then sort of steer it that way. And then my daughter will then choose one of her books that she thinks her friend will like. And then, you know, you're bringing a secondhand book that is always useful and can easily be passed on. A lot of toys break and wear and tear, and they're not as easy to pass on. So it's sort of steering things a little bit as well as planting the seeds, and then being responsive to how they react. You don't want any kickback at this stage, because they're 5. My daughter and I, you know, really friendly with each other, and generally she likes hanging out with me, listens to what I say, does what I say, likes what I suggest. So if there is any pushback, then I really listen.
Yeah, I think being able to sort of start your parenting journey in a very conscious, deliberate way is obviously the ideal, isn't it? And you know, it sounds like you're really shaping the way that she sees the world in it. That's, that sounds really manipulative, and it's not, but making sharing really normal for her, normalizing all these things, and it can feel a little bit harder when if you're suddenly coming to trying to make some eco-friendly changes and your kids are a bit older. But there's a brilliant, I'll put the website in the link. There's a brilliant website, which I don't know if any of you heard of, called Whirly, and it's like a toy subscription. The boys are going, yay! It's a toy subscription site, and I think it goes up to 8, but the toys are sort of suitable for older kids as well. And basically, you pay a subscription, you get toys, they play with them, they become bored of them, you send them back, they get more toys. And again, it's just a way of introducing that concept of sharing, not needing to own things, why we're spreading things out and that sort of thing. So that can be really helpful as well. Right, there was one more question. Mel, I don't have kids.
Jen, will I be able to see all the comments afterwards? I'd love to read through what everyone said.
Yeah, so when if you go and watch the replay, you can see all the comments again. So guys, and for you guys, if there's any links or anything in there, then you can find them, and the chat stays there, which is one of the nice things about this platform. And then the other question was about, are these types of topics becoming more common among younger generations? Do you find environmental topics making their way into your kids' conversations with friends and family? So I could say something about that, but I'll let you go.
Then you say what you think, but I was going to say at the end, actually, of the presentation, but that engaging with your respective spheres of influence is obviously the next step, or it can be part of all of this right from the outset. But school, my daughter's school, is the obvious place to start, and somehow is because they know that I'm sort of mad about this stuff. My daughter's ended up on the eco committee. She and a friend represent her year group, which is just so funny because she didn't come home and tell me. I found out because I saw her photo on a board and I asked her what it was, and she didn't really know. And there's a lot of that. But as a result, I've sort of then been in contact with the head teacher, who's put me in touch with the science teacher who runs the eco committee, and I'm going to come in and talk to them a little bit about what hopefully might be helpful, and books that I can recommend that they read to the kids at storytime around pollution and plastic and things. There's lots of those out there. And then help them run the secondhand uniform cupboard. And so it's getting involved in the school where you can feel you can be really useful as a parent with a bit of insight and lots of motivation. And B, my daughter sees me talking to all the teachers who she's utterly in awe of, as I am. They're amazing, obviously, but they're real influences for her, real figures of authority. So it's for her to see me talking to them and sharing knowledge and having a relationship, like I feel that reinforces me, reinforces everything I'm saying to her, that the teachers and I agree that this is all very important. So there's a little bit going on, and nothing to do with me, but the school does do a little bit around plastic pollution. I think most schools do this now in their science classes, and it gets more and more involved and interesting as the year groups go up. So as the children get older, they do more and more around it. But there's not a huge amount in the school where my daughter is yet, but I'm quite excited about moving things in the right direction.
I mean, I just think the fact that the majority of schools now, primary schools and secondary schools, probably have an eco committee or some kind of thing like that. So I mean, that in itself, I think, speaks volumes. Ray said, a 5-year-old on the eco group, and certainly we've got local schools around us where there is a representative from each year group, and the 5-year-old's voice is heard. And and we've got a talk later on in the week by a guy called Ed Moore, who is a teacher at Damer's First School in Dorchester, and the things he has done there are just absolutely amazing and so inspiring. And just thinking really about the ways that they've been able to incorporate the environment into every area of the curriculum. So they'll go and do a school litter pick, and then there's a load of maths to be done on, bar charts of the types of litter found. And then there's a bit of activism or letter writing on writing to companies or writing to your MP, or, so it's a real eye opener. And I do think it's much more talked about within schools and with children than it ever has been, or certainly in my day.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of like activism and online communities, I do talk to my 5-year-old a teeny tiny bit about some of the things that we do together or have done the last few weeks, and I post them online, and such a parent who I don't know has commented and said, isn't that great? And I feed that back to her just to show that there are people out there who are cheering us on, you know, in the absence of actually seeing friends. A lot of my friends are interested in this, but, you know, understandably, life's busy, and people around us actually aren't that sort of hands-on about what we're doing. There are some, of course, but these online communities are amazing, and I'm trying to kind of, I don't want her on Facebook under her own steam anytime soon, thank you, but I do talk to her about how much is going on sort of on the internet, and how those communities are just amazing for supporting you and yeah, cheering you on and sharing information and things.
Brilliant. Final question. What can you recommend for children who have heard the very scary elements of climate change and find it terrifying?
Oh, bless them. Oh, I have a friend whose son, she was saying I would never tell him about melting ice or trees being chopped down and orangutans and things, because he'd have nightmares. And that really struck me, because my 5-year-old's not like that, I don't think. Oh, dearie me. I focus on the positive again, focus on the things you can do today, and talk about all the small changes you can make that do make a difference. Talk about everything that everyone else is doing. Draw on online communities if you're members of a member of a Facebook group. You know, I'm members of so many. There are just so many great things going on, and just talk about, although it seems like a small thing you're doing at home, there are so many people doing lots of small things, and all this moves things in the right direction. And there are, you know, so many seriously young children from 5 and 6. I've talked about them in my book, but they're all online. You can find them if you Google children change makers, you know, who are doing amazingly positive things, which also might make a young child worried about all of this feel like they could do likewise and feel better about it. And I also recommend writing a letter to someone, to think about someone in their community that they know who's doing amazing things, or you could write to Sir David Attenborough if you like, but ideally someone you know who could then write back. It could be a local charity, it could be someone who works in an organization that's campaigning around something to do with the environment, or someone who's, you know, done litter picking for 20 years, and just write them a letter and say thank you, it's amazing, you know, and tell them why it's amazing. And just these little sort of thinking positively, thinking about what you're doing, what other people are doing, and acknowledging it in terms of what other people are doing, and also acknowledging what you're doing. Like, have a little list of, like, this is great, you know, we're six weeks on from when we first read about this and felt helpless, we've done this and this, and then, you know, you can chart your progression.
Yeah, definitely. And I would absolutely echo that. I think, you know, for us as grown-ups, it's an overwhelming and, you know, potentially sort of terrifying thing to learn about. And so I can only imagine for kids what it the same. But, you know, I talk about this in terms of sort of adults with a bit of eco-anxiety and things. You know, the antidote to it is action. And so I think we'd watched one of the David Attenborough documentaries, and it was quite a sort of traumatizing one. And then, you know, at bedtime, I sat there with he was then 10, my eldest, and, you know, we made a list of things that as a 10-year-old he could do. So, you know, it was kind of approach school about starting an eco group, create a poster that we can share on social media, do a litter pick. You know, it was all these kind of very practical things that he personally could do. So, you know, I think you need to acknowledge the fact that there are some scary things happening, but as Anya said, completely point them to the people, you know, let them know that it's not just you guys doing your little thing in your house. There are all these amazing people. There are some incredibly clever scientists around the world working really hard to find solutions, and that all these people, you know, are doing all these amazing things, because I think we have to, you know, we have to give them some hope, and we have to, you know, and again, we have to help them to take action. So that's been absolutely amazing, Anya. Thank you. My boys
Thank you so much, Jen.
I'm just going to turn my video on, because my boys have just gone and got their posters, because they want me to just show them. So this is what they did.
Oh, bless them. That's brilliant.
And I shared them on social media, so, you know, they got sort of reshared and all that kind of thing. So you know, anything that's a really positive action for the kids to do. But this has been absolutely fabulous. Can you just remind us again verbally where we can come and find you?
So bigdreamslittlefootprints.org, and there's an email on there, so it's info@bigdreamslittlefootprints. Would love to hear from you, really, please. And Twitter and Instagram is just my name if you wanted to follow what I'm doing. So it would be great to hear from you.
And you've got that teaching resource, and I posted the link way up in the chat for the your website and for the resourcefulness section, which I think is amazing, and your book as well. And guys, I'm sort of ending each session by saying, you know, this festival is all about imperfect action. It's all about taking action. So would love to hear either in the chat here or in the on the Facebook group, you know, what action you're going to take as a result of listening to Anya's brilliant ideas. We've got this pledge page that I've set up where people can come and they can post their promises and their pledges that they're sort of thinking about as a result. So I'll pop the link in there again. If people want to go and share that. But yeah, massive thanks, Anya. I thought that was just so inspiring and kind of so creative, all the brilliant things that you're doing. So thank you.
Really sweet. Thank you very much, Jen. Cheers. Good luck with the rest of the festival.
Thank you. Bye-bye.